Welcome to this episode of the Local Earth Discussion Series. We are grateful to be bringing you information about visionary solutions for the planet and regenerative community development. We are a nonprofit organization that operates primarily on donations. So if you appreciate the information that's shared in these discussions, please consider becoming a Local Earth Patreon member. The information is in the description below. This episode is also brought to you in partnership with the Solar Energy Alliance. Below in the description is a link to a free solar proposal for your home and information on how to become a partner or an ambassador with the Alliance. We now invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of the Local Earth Discussion Series. Thank you. Welcome everyone to this episode of the Local Earth Discussion Series focused on visionary solutions. And our featured guest for today is Susan Manewich. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you. It's nice to be with you this morning.
Honor to have you here with us. My name is Joshua Alvord, and I am the host for today's show. And had the opportunity to meet Susan several years ago, probably 2017. At the speaker series, I think.
Oh yeah.
And Susan, you were one of those people that immediately I just like resonated with. I was just like, this person is awesome, and had the opportunity to speak with you after the discussion series, and then throughout the last couple of years, I've had the opportunity to spend some time together and get to know you and just really respect you as an amazing human being.
Yeah. I can say the feeling is very mutual. I've been able to watch you and what you've done in these last couple of years, and I'm very honored to be speaking with you today. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'm going to share an introduction to Susan, who has a lot of accomplishments. And we'll start here with Susan. Has a master's in science and is currently the president of the New Energy Movement 501c3 and director of the Nui Foundation, a community interest company in the UK. Susan focuses on conscious leadership for the positive evolution of all life. She has spent 20 plus years in the areas of leadership consulting, emotional intelligence, resonant technology, and better understanding human dynamics and social systems to successfully transition through the current global changes. She has recently co-authored the book Hidden Energy with Jean Manning, released in the fall of 2019, and has contributed a research chapter with her colleague John Climo, PhD, to the book Beyond UFOs, The Science of Consciousness and Contact with Non-Human Intelligence in July of 2018. She also serves as a researcher for CCRI, the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute. Susan currently works to bring ethics, integrity, and cohesion to the field of new energy technology. She has experience with the Resonance Project Foundation, where she was involved in key organizational strategic initiatives and also led major communication strategies. Some of Susan's professional accomplishments are in the field of conscious leadership development and emotional intelligence, where her work has been consistently well praised by her clients around the globe, including Harvard Business School, Yale University, University of Chicago, GSB, London Business School, Singapore Medical School, and many corporate and nonprofit clients. Susan is involved in several film projects regarding technology and consciousness. She has published several pieces of work in the field of emotional intelligence, and she grew up in Massachusetts and was a participant with the PEER Program for Extraordinary Experience Research Group in Cambridge, Massachusetts, under John E. Mack, MD. Susan's passion is working with new consciousness, global strategies, and emerging technologies to help groups and organizations bridge gaps in conversations and understandings to be able to work together effectively through this global change. So, wow.
A
lot of accomplishments, a lot of experience, very well respected in your field. So again, just a real honor to be here in this conversation with you.
Aw, thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know, it's funny, I realized I gave you that bio, right? And it's like, that's a little long. And we talked about, I don't know, maybe we should shorten it. But it's actually, here's the weird thing. It's nice to get that read back by somebody else as a way to go, oh, I think I'm now seeing how this all really fits together, right?
Yeah.
It's like sometimes you just go along doing what you're doing and you do, and you don't necessarily always pick your head up and say, okay, how's this all fitting together?
Yeah. Yeah. At first, like the same, like I was like, wow, this maybe is long, but then it really does show like everything. I mean, you've been involved with so much, so it gives a lot of credit to what you have to say. So I think it's
Mm.
important.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for saying that. I
Yeah.
think it is important because the path that I've taken has been a little bit different than other people's that they've taken, and that's okay. But it shows that we each have a unique path.
Yes. So, do you have any ideas of where you would like to start this conversation?
Well, maybe picking up from the bio read, because the EI piece is actually, emotional intelligence, to call it EI. It's actually something that I did for a long time. I did for over a decade professionally, and before I got into what I call the new energy technology field, visibly, because I was doing a lot of this behind the scenes for 20 plus years. With a group here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm in Massachusetts right now, so that's why I say here. And I'm really am seeing, as we are ending 2019, why I have been so adamant to bring in certain principles into this field, because I do feel that these pieces are connected to the new energy technology arena. The emotional intelligence I don't think is a nice to have. It's an innate part of how we work on these technologies and why that piece is important. And we can get into that a little bit later, but yeah, I seem to what I call create friction sometimes when I bring up things like consciousness. Consciousness not so much. You can say that word and it can mean 20,000 different things, but when you say things like ethics, integrity, those can be perceived as either being judgmental or we each have those ideas about what those are, right? What those things mean. But then also the emotional intelligence piece. I think sometimes in this arena, we're so used to tech being tech, right? Like, well, does it work or doesn't it work? And what is it? And then all of a sudden, you come in with these soft skills and say, well, I think this is one of the things that may be really important to this arena that we haven't really considered, and it can create some friction, or it can, people have a tendency to sometimes go, no, this isn't that important, right? Well, I disagree, and there's a lot of reasons why.
So, the emotional intelligence component. So, I guess I'm seeing like in new energy, like there's the manufacturing and like the devices or like the actual physical things that can be created, but then there's the organizational structures and intentions of like the companies and
Yeah.
organizations that are creating these.
Yeah.
And so I guess that emotional intelligence relates to like how those organizations are working, those people are communicating, partnerships they're creating.
Yeah. Money is flowing, equality, the ecosystem, the living ecosystem that this is in, if even people consider it a living ecosystem. Sometimes people don't. Sometimes it's just money, or it's just considered technology, or it's just considered a profit, as well. Our group doesn't look at it that way. We look at it the opposite. We look at the creation of these technologies. I would say it's probably more in alignment of Rudolf Steiner, that we look at this as energy as being living, and that energy has a consciousness to it. There's a group called the Prout Institute that talks about microvita, meaning like the small living life, that there is actually morality at its core, right? And so if we're tapping into this field of energy that's all around us, this energy, whether we call it 0 point or ether for this conversation. Maybe we can just call it ether if you feel okay with that. I know some people are more adamant to call it one thing or another, but if we're tapping into this ether, and this ether it's not just, free floating energy that's just whizzing around waiting for us to suck it up. Let's say hypothetically it does have consciousness to it, then the living system that this is in and how it's created is sacred. It's a sacred space. And my sense is what we're moving towards for evolution of humanity is being able to see that life energy as sacred. So therefore, the creation of these technologies, I don't want to say should be, but it may be wise to consider the energy that is around us and how it's utilized as a sacred space. And it's very different, right? It sounds probably a little bit like hokey or whatever, but the more you talk to people that have been in this field for a very long time, they will tell you that the consciousness is at the utmost. Like that's the major piece. They'll tell you that, and those are people that have, again, been in this for a very long time. They will share that piece with you, and it typically blows some scientists away, and then they come to these kind of more grand realizations that, wow, because we hear that we're connected to everything around us, right? Well, what if we really are? And so how can we have that concept and not treat this tech as if something is not alive? And I think it's a transition. I think this is a switch, and I don't look at it as a nice to have. I look at it as something that's quite essential as part of our evolving consciousness. We as because a lot of the work that you do, there's a connection to nature, right? Respecting the land, respecting water, respecting the air that's around, respecting plants, that you're respecting that life force, right? I'm not sure if that's what you call it, but so there's this awakening consciousness, and it appears that this next kind of piece for us is to see the almost like the scientific workbench as a spiritual altar, and like to move that from like a spirit, move it towards, more of a spirit based. And does that mean that we have to be praying around everything? No, it doesn't mean that. It may be even as simple as an acknowledgement of what we're working with, an acknowledgement of this life force. It may be as simple as that.
Yeah. And like, as you were speaking, I'm just thinking of like, I feel like there's a lot of talk of the unified field, and you're speaking, and like I'm thinking of the magnetic poles and what attracts things and what pushes things away. And like if we're in this space of ether and everything is connected, and I think sometimes we'll say these things of if we have a yoga practice or a meditation practice, and at times we like understand that everything's connected, but then sometimes I'll find myself just like kind of forgetting that, and like being like, we're using this technology to connect from California to Massachusetts right now, and like that in a way is connecting us. But then there's the consciousness and the content of the spirit, what has brought, like, why the two of us are talking at this moment. I mean, there's just so many things that are influencing everything at every moment.
Absolutely. And I want to, if I can read you something that I pulled up today. I just had a feeling this was going to pop in, and it is. It's nice. Because like I was saying earlier, you just never know interviews, like what direction they take. This was from Steiner. He said, if you ascribe a real power and effect to the moral impulse, so that the impulses inherently have both potential power, just as the seed already contains the germ of a fully grown plant, you may be called half a fool. If you were to still go further and attribute moral impulses to natural processes, then you'd be called a complete fool. If you have felt an electrical current in its spiritual nature surging through your nervous system, you would know that electricity is not just a force of nature. Electricity is also something moral. So right? I mean, it just kind of just like, it pops it into this. And, we live, we're living at this epoch, right, where you've got the excess of materialism, the excess of disconnection, you've got the excess of, um, when I say disconnection, that can mean so many things: disconnection from your food, disconnection from your water, your electricity, disconnection from, if you're on devices all day and I'm a mom, so your parents are like, hey, dinner, come on, it's time to eat. And the child's got their head in their phone. That's disconnection, right? Like they're focused on something else. So we have all of these potential disconnections, these distractions in they're everywhere. They're everywhere around us. Even things that are whizzing through the air from electromagnetic noise, right? And things that are affecting our brains and our heart coherency and everything else. So you have that, and then to bring up this word, like something like a moral impulse. It's like, oh, can we really even think of that? Well, maybe this is this bridge and this transition that science and technology needs to go through. We've really done traditional objective logic-based science really well, I would say. Like, I think we've nailed a lot of that really well, but the thing that we haven't is really looking more about natural sciences and us as human beings with our senses and our intuition. What does that next piece now look like? But it does seem that this is this next piece that's on the horizon. And I did some research last year that got published that does speak to this too.
So how do you feel like we can bring this emotional intelligence, like in our strategies of how we choose to collaborate and work with and bring information forward? Because I feel like we're at this time, like, and I personally try to stay away from like any us versus them. I try to stay in this, like, we are all one at different parts, so like never pointing fingers.
Yeah.
Yet I feel like there's this feeling that a lot of the current status of society is like very influenced by large corporations and certain government entities that steer things in a direction that sometimes people don't feel like it's in the best, like the highest good for all.
Sure.
So out of the 7.8 billion of us on the planet or something, like how we start to work together to kind of transform this paradigm into a more, I guess, to me, the words integrated and distributed have been like a big part of the work I've been doing with like community and eco-village development, where there's not such a hierarchy and it's distributed more throughout a whole group.
Right.
So how do you feel like we can kind of implement these facets of emotional intelligence into how we organize and work together?
Well, you brought up something really important. You brought up the word, I think you said power, right? Distributed power. Is that what you
Yep.
said? Okay.
Yep.
So, power is a funny thing. You've got power, like devices that power things, right? You've got money that creates power, or lack of it that creates no power, or to be disempowered. And then you've got organizations with hierarchy and status that create power. I mean, there's many other, but if you're just looking at this little microcosm here, that's even just in and of itself right there. When I look at the work that I did in doing consulting in organizations for organizational development, it's riddled with a lot of those types of things. So that, I would say, is maybe had its day because there are new structures, more holocratic type structures that are moving and popping up. And I think we can thank, the younger generation for saying, hey, I don't like this power structure thing. I don't know what you're doing, but this just doesn't feel right to me. You have more of these structures that are coming up. the terms like emotional intelligence, by the way, I worked with the people that originated this. These guys, and they were guys, were the developers of this. It was Dan Goleman who popularized it, but these guys were the originators. They did work on actually, the emotional intelligence stemmed out of studying juvenile delinquency, trying to understand why did teenagers do the things that they did, and they realized they didn't have the capacity to read emotions accurately and to effectively and intelligently deal with their emotions. So that's actually how this arose. Now it's, a big kind of corporate term that a lot of people know and understand. So I think that over these maybe last 10, 15 years, there's been a lot of awareness. So I know that there are big organizations that still have these, tight structures. At the same time, I think that things are moving and things are changing. And there is a push that's happening from this younger generation that doesn't want to work in those types of organizations and does want something new to come through. So I think that piece is shifting and changing. It's obviously going to be slower in like a Citibank or something like that.
Yeah.
But for organizations that are working for an environmental reason or clean energy or maybe alternative health or something like that, this is a more amenable type of way to go about things. But going back to what you just said, the way that we look at what we do is we saw something that we didn't like. And I say we, this is the team that I work with. We didn't like how money and the inventor worked. What we saw was, you see it on both sides of the equation. The people that have the money, typically they're investors. They will want to own the tech and kind of own the investor, right? That doesn't work for us. Human beings are not owned people. Like, human beings are sovereign, right? Like, again, this is working to create the ecosystem. So we don't look at it like that. We don't want that type of relationship. We don't believe that if someone is contributing something, that they have a right to treat people less than. Like, we don't do that. We're done with that. That no way, that doesn't work. It's insulting, and we can't be a contributor to that insulting process. All right. And then, conversely, you've got the inventors, and the inventors will typically hang on to, their IP or their ideas or their secret sauce, so to speak, because they're so afraid that someone's gonna, take it and run with it and copy it and, or say then it doesn't work when it never got a thorough vetting process. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons. So, I mean, basically, what you're dealing with is what I call, it's almost like this ingrained behaviors of inequity to begin with. And so what you've got to work to do is say, okay, we're going to create an ecosystem that inequity is not there. And that means looking at everything. It means looking at how money is given, how it's what the attachment is to the financial process, what type of payouts people get if technology gets sold and goes to XYZ. Like, what does that look like? What type of manufacturing are we looking at? Are we looking at conscious manufacturing? Are we looking at manufacturing that can do things that we wouldn't approve of? So you've got to literally look at the whole system. You even have to look at your legal team. And does the legal team, because most law is based on someone's doing something wrong and you're going to get in trouble, right? I mean, that's most legal contracts. We actually work with, it's going to sound funny, but it's the truth, conscious law, conscious lawyers that work they see life force as being a primary part of what they do. And the goal is to create the win-win for everybody. And not that, that we have a lawyer that works for us that is anti the inventor, anti the funder. That's not the way it goes. This is about bringing in that collaboration right off the bat to say, we're here doing this so all of us can create this win-win. So that's just a little bit of a sample, but I would say that, do we have it all figured out right now? No, but are we? Absolutely. Every time we come into what I call the old world reality, we go, oh, that's not going to work. And then we have to take it, either dismantle it or just come up with something new that works for everybody. And what it's doing is it's creating trust. It's allowing people to drop these barriers, is to drop whatever resistances that they're holding, to say, okay, wait a minute, these guys are different. They want to do this differently. And we're still going to be able to, get our technology worked on, and we're going to feel good in this process. We're not going to feel, snatched from or taken from. Yeah, that's what's going to happen. So, this is literally like saying we needed to create something completely and totally brand new without even knowing that we did. And we continue to do this every step in the process along the way. So so that's just a little bit, but it's not, again, I don't call it pie in the sky thinking. It's not like we have this grand idea that we're going to do XYZ. We didn't start out like that. We started out going, you know what? We don't like the way that this thing rolls with money, with the investors and the inventors. It feels gross. I mean, and that's just, being 100% honest, and no judgment on behalf of people that do that. We just said, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel right. How can something that is so incredibly potent and potentially sacred be treated like that? We need to shift and change our relationship with this whole thing. And by the way, it's been a to-do. It's not like, all of a sudden everyone's all happy. I mean, we've had investors that have looked at us and by the way, we don't work with traditional investors. We've had those type of people look at us and go, oh, you're not going to get very far. And we got far and we got further. And so now what's happening is we educate these people that want to come and take part in what we do and say, here's how we do it. Here's how we'd like to do it. Would you like to be a part of creating, this new process with us? So you invite them into the conversation, invite them in to show up differently, as opposed to showing up in the traditional way that they normally do. And these folks will still, make money as well. That's okay, but it's not going to be, a takeover, or it's not going to be so they can, all go buy yachts for themselves. Like, this is not about that. This is about getting power to people that are in need, and doing it in a way that is efficient, and doing it in a way that is more amenable to people's spirits and their souls. Like, that's what this thing is about. And anything less than that, there's no point in doing it. Because, and for other people that are involved in this, everyone can have their different viewpoint, their different original, signature on this, but this is ours. And this is one of the things that we think is the way to go.
It's interesting, like in a conversation, like hearing you speak, like, little like light bulbs go off about different things you say at one point in time. And I'm like, okay, like I'll try to reference this. And then, it continues to flow. And so like, I've got thoughts of like holacracy, sociocracy, game A, game B. And then just the most present thing, I guess, was just like when you said a system, trust was one big word that I felt and heard in there.
Yeah.
And like starting to create these containers where I think it's hard to conceptualize on a planet of almost 8 billion people, certain people suffering in certain ways, certain people having extreme luxuries in certain ways. And I think it's sometimes you don't necessarily see those two together, but I think if you're like in a small group of like 10 or 12 people in a room, and like somebody's really suffering or hurting in the room, like over in the corner, it makes it hard for like, to genuinely have a good time, like knowing that somebody's like, like hurting there. And so I think
Yeah.
I'm really hoping that we start to like be able to
Yeah.
hold that at a planetary scale of like, does it really bring us joy to have like the third yacht and helicopter and fourth luxury home when there's a lot of people that are really suffering? And I think a lot of people are going to start to be like, maybe this isn't bringing as much. And so we can
Yeah.
start to bring some of that abundance that was in kind of old paradigm systems that I think are going to really start to perpetuate like new growth in a lot of these areas.
Exactly. Well, there you go. Exactly. And you know, for us personally, we said we don't ever want to take a like we're not here to make money off of this. We're not here to receive like the profit off of this personally. So we cut all of that out. And so, you know, I think you actually have to start right in the core and hold that piece, right? Because we're also dealing with assessing technology. We're also dealing with, you know, so with that, you have to walk a really straight line, because what we would also see, you know, just to add this piece in here, because you're talking about, you know, the inequity, but what also adds to that inequity is an attachment to the outcome, right? And so, you know, what we would see often is the investor is most of the investors are not knowledgeable at all about the different technologies. So they rely upon the engineering team or second party or third party vetting team to say this works, and to what degree does it work, like what amount of power is it saving or what amount of power is it generating, right? So if you have an attachment to that, you're going to see things that are not there, and you're going to want to see things that are not there. And so we would see that it clouded the capacity for people to see what was most truthful. And then you have that on top of, you know, not having good emotional recognition or emotion management. And you know, people have a lot of emotion around money. People have a lot of emotion around IP. They have a lot of emotion around this. I mean, some of these people have spent all of their money, all of their life savings, or live, you know, like for the inventors, work in their basement, and they've lost marriages, and you know, I mean, these stories, you cannot believe these stories. I mean, I've got my own personal stories, and it's like, but this stuff is, you know, it's big. So, you know, if you can find ways to create the space, it's almost like a meditation, right? Like, you know, you work to create the space, because in the space between the spaces, you can think more clearly. You can see those greater connections. You can actually, you know, have spirit be included in what you do. But if you're locked down and the focus is on the things that close us down, not open us up, you know, they're more in that lower solar plexus, right? That kind of tense, tight feeling of you know, the attachment to the outcome, the attachment to the money and the power and the you know, the win, right? And someone else loses, then you don't see the magic juju that the universe and the spirit aspect is actually trying to communicate, because it is. I can tell you that. And if it's okay, can I jump in and share some of that research that I did last year? Because I think it's
Absolutely,
a,
please.
and by the way, if you want, these are all in PowerPoint, so I can get those to you, and you can throw them up if you want.
Okay, that'd be great.
So for no exaggeration, 25 years plus, I had wanted to do research. So after I left, I got my bachelor's degree here in Massachusetts, and then I did a semester of grad school, but got really bored, and then went to Boston to spend some time with the peer group. And you read that in the intro. It's was called the Program for Extraordinary Experience Research, for people who had, quote unquote, at the time was considered extraordinary experiences, whether they be out of body, saw what people would consider interdimensional beings or UFOs or interdimensional ships or things like that, right? Maybe had some strong intuitive capacities. So I was asked if I would make a connection with this group because of some things I was doing at the time. And I was young, I was like 21, 22 years old. And so I went there and spent some time with this group. And I had just finished my bachelor's degree, so I thought, oh, what a great research project would be to find out like the scientific downloads that these contactees get, right? Well, we never even got close to that. um, for a whole host of reasons. And we lost Dr. John Mack in 2004 as well. So that research never got done. Well, then comes a gentleman by the name of Ray Hernandez and some of my colleagues who were at Harvard that put together this group. And it's now called CCRI. It's a Consciousness Contact Research Institute. And we were chatting one day and I said, he said, hey, Susan, we're ready for this third phase of the study. Would you be interested in helping out? I'm like, oh my God, yes. And here's the question that we need to ask. So the question that we asked it's an open survey, but it was people that had already answered many pieces along the survey. They had something like 3,500 people. Well, this got whittled down to about 90. And the question was, do you believe that you possess information about advanced technology, advanced physics, or other scientific information that you've never read or learned about in your environment? Now, out of the big sampling of about 2,500 people, you want to take a guess at how many said yes? You can just guess a percentage.
I was
Less than
75%.
Okay, you're a strong guesser. No, 41%, which is still pretty significant, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, well, wait a second, if this is just, if this is just all out there stuff, why are people getting information about science and advanced technology, right? I mean, kind of like, you got to ask the question. So we then asked some more questions in regards to this. I'll just quote you some of my favorite ones. We asked, well, where were you getting this information? Where is this coming from? The vast majority of people, but they were sleeping in bed. They were either asleep or they were laying in bed or they were waking up in the morning and they were literally getting the information. You had 21% of the people said they were on a ship with a being and they were getting this information. 20% meditation, remote viewing that they were able to do. So, okay, that's interesting, right? And so we'll go a little bit further. This is one of my more favorite ones. They also talk about the type of beings, like ranges all over. Okay, so some classified the race like a cosmic race of beings. Some said that they were pure energy, human-looking energy beings, my higher self, right? So, we're not getting, I would say, this one dominant group of beings that are coming in. No. This thing is like, it's like a smorgasbord. And for me, the most absolute important question is, what is the purpose of this? Why were they giving you this information? What was this about? And here we go. And this is why I work as much as I work. 24%, which was the dominant percentage, said Earth changes, the upcoming shift. We need to learn to heal the Earth. We need to learn to increase our abilities because these abilities will be used in the near future. Okay, so 24%. The purpose of the information was also at 19% increase the vibration, increase our vibration, increase love, increase our capacity to be calm, and use our greater intelligence. So, I mean, there's other percentages in here that I can share. So, when you look at that, you say, ha, all right, there's something that's happening, there's something that's going on that people are picking up, right? And they're feeling strongly compelled to create, to share, to collaborate. And the irony is to do it in a loving way, right? I mean, that is what's being conveyed here. It's not saying hold on to what you have and guard it with your life. It's not saying that you need to create greater power for yourself. It's the highest percentage of people, they're they need to share this. They feel a need to collaborate. 95% of the people said they felt a strong need to share and to collaborate and to connect with others. This was about the collaboration process. This was about connecting with other people. So, you know, I look at that. I mean, I know what I feel for myself, but I look at that and I say, we're being asked to show up in a different way than what we have previously as it relates to technology and devices and energy, output. Like, we're being asked to show up differently in this thing. And, again, when you look at someone like Steiner got this. Steiner understood this. So we at least have some groundedness in terms of who came before us to be able to look at as, some potential guidelines. So does that make sense?
It does. And like what you shared of a high percentage wanting to like feel it's important to come forward, share the information, collaborate. And it feels like that is, and back to like that trust word earlier, it feels
Yeah.
like you and your organizations with the New Energy Movement and it's NUI, is that how you say it? NUI?
Nui, yeah. It's
NUI?
a Hawaiian word. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It feels like you are building that safe container where people that want to collaborate can bring the information and the knowledge and the wisdom and cultivate that field of trust, and just everybody from the leadership team is embodying these values and ethics, and just like the organizational management, those energy structures within how the organizations operate. Just that's kind of the sense I got, is like that you're creating a field of
Yeah.
kind of trust.
Yeah, it's time to bring in the Rebecca Hardcastle, right? I chatted with her the other day. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but she runs an organization that deals with exo consciousness, which is basically, I would call it cosmic consciousness, like the higher level stuff. And I think basically what we're saying is it's time to bring in the new way. And whether it's called exo consciousness, the new way, or moral, or whatever, we don't have an attachment to it. We just know that there's got to be a way that, that feeling of when you went to go work for a place, maybe when you were younger, and you're like, oh my god, I can't be in this place, right?
Yeah.
Right. Or being like in an office building or something. Some people are like, oh my god, the structure and the fakeness and so like this should feel different. This should feel like nature. The system, the way the energy, because the way that the energy moves between one person to the next in the system should feel like natural. It should feel like a life energy pump. It shouldn't, you shouldn't feel grinded down. You shouldn't feel like someone's taking something from you. You shouldn't feel like that. That's not what we're going for here. And that's where I believe the ecosystem, and the team believes that the ecosystem that all of this is held in is just as important as the energy that you are trying to tap into. And that that may be one of the big, everyone's always looking for, what's the mystery school information, what's this and what's that. Sometimes I think it's just at its core, it really is about that acknowledgement of that morality piece, right? And does that mean that we all have to be saints and gurus? No. But I think what it means is we do need to up level our relationship that we have with ourselves, the relationship we have with each other, the relationship we have with finance, the relationship we have with technology, and the relationship that we have with what we do with all of it. So, this to me is people talk about ascension. I think this is part of the whole ascension process. It's right here. It's right here. And it may not be sexy, and it may not be super mysterious, or grab a headline, but I think it's in alignment for sure.
Well, something that you shared there is like bringing back kind of a memory of even a couple of years ago in one of our conversations of when we were just getting started with the initial phases of our Eco Village project out here.
Yeah.
And I feel like in a conversation you and I had about like the new energy movement and technologies,
Mhm.
and like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I kind of felt like what I was reading in our conversation is, and I might be infusing some of my own thoughts and perspectives in here, but that potentially we all hold little bits of the wisdom and the keys and the knowledge, and maybe there's this larger consciousness that has created it this way that not any one of us has the whole thing, and we need to learn with our emotional intelligence and fields of trust to work together.
Right.
And that some of these newer technologies might come through in the coherence of a field of, whether it's 5 people, 10 people, 12 people. We've been working a lot on something kind of the fractal of 12s and
Mhm.
144, just based on Dunbar's number.
Mhm.
And that really, I guess it could apply to the creation of an eco-village or a regenerative community,
Yeah.
the development of energy technology or devices that are
Yeah.
providing energy. It's
Yeah.
like maybe there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 inventors that all hold a piece of the blueprint,
Mhm.
and like I just feel like it's an important part to, it's just kind of a mysterious part to me to like think of, like maybe we do need to learn how to trustingly and safely work together,
Yeah.
because maybe that's like where some of the true power lies. I don't know.
Yeah, listen, absolutely. I mean, there's a couple things I can say about that. The field of energy that's created is it's potent, right? I mean, one person can create a strong field of energy. Two, when you get, whether 3, 6, 9, or 12, like that's potent. I'll go back to f- with some of the inventors, they'll get their technology working, and then it won't measure again working. Okay, if it sometimes if they take it out of the local environment, like if the environment's been conditioned
Mhm.
vice versa, and they take it out of that environment, then it doesn't work, right?
Mhm.
And so, by the way, part of our vetting protocols is it has to be able to work outside of the local environment. Now, that's not to say that the technology doesn't work for, that person or that, little area, which could be valuable. But what we try to do is, we have our vetting protocols of what we utilize for ourselves, because our goal is to try to get it out to the people, right?
Yeah.
More wider. So, um, that does happen, whether that is the effect of the inventor effect, which has been, written about before, or group effect, but being able to replicate that hasn't worked out so well. And there are ways to manage that piece, but so I just wanted to say that that is something that we've seen the inventor effect, or whether it's a conditioned environment effect, which does have to do with the relationship of the technology and the local environment. So that's again, that's just interesting. It's interesting. One of the things I also think is, for and I know I've said this, and we're probably not at the point of like, well, what people can do, but I think it's a good segue. Like, the book is good. Hidden Energy book.
Yes. Yes.
Um, it's good, but we actually we wrote it for the layperson. We wrote it for everybody, that everybody could read it. A mom, like I have a bunch, females, so I have a bunch of mom friends, and my mom friends are reading it, and I'm shocked, because I'm like, really? So what do you think about it? Afraid like they're gonna say, Susan, it's boring, or they're gonna say something like, no, it's fascinating. And I'm like, really? They're like, I love the stories. I can relate to the stories. I'm like, so what about the technology pieces? Like, you know what? I didn't think I was going to get it, but I do.
Mhm.
So that's why we did it. We wanted to be able to educate people of the different types of technologies that are out there to utilize, like electromagnetic motors, permanent magnet motors, water, plasma, obviously the LNR. You're not going to get mom really using LNR, but my point is that if you can, at least kind of understand some of those basic principles, then you can kind of put your consciousness to it and see these things working, and visualize how this all, potentially can come together. So um, the education piece, with some of the basics, because I think we're told in this planet that, you have to be super special to understand physics, right? You have to be super special to create a technology. I don't know about that. I think that you have to care, and I think that you have to be able to understand the natural forces and understand your relationship with these natural forces. I think it seems to be that maybe one of the um, one of the things that maybe people don't really want us to know about, because when you look at some of these contactees, um, they only went to engineering school afterwards. After they had that, talked to a guy the other day. He wasn't an engineer. He got all of this information during a sweat lodge, believe it or not, working with an indigenous community out on the west coast of the United States, and then went to engineering school afterwards to try to, because he said, I feel like I needed more information how to put this together. So, it's and a lot of the people that are getting the advanced scientific downloads about, things, cosmology, they're not reading physics books. They're basically, it's coming to them, right? So, maybe this is actually more for all of us than we've ever been led to believe.
As you were speaking, I was just, different forms of spirituality or metaphysics, and we can reference our higher self, and there's a lot of
Yeah,
different ways to like
yeah,
perceive and talk about these things. And just as you're talking, I personally that believe at our highest self, like connecting with the infinite cosmic energy that is all around. Like we are our own free energy
yeah,
field, sovereign being,
yeah,
and like that really like all it takes, when you said like maybe it's like care, is like learning how to love, like be
yeah,
in connection and generate love,
yeah,
and like that's all you need, and that creates the technology, like
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think it's definitely it's at the core of this. Like it's at the core of this. Um, and I do think it's an evolving process, because people will say to me, and I want to address this because I think this is super important, because, the state that you're in right now, I mean, look at all those power outages that happened in Northern California, and I took letters from people, and it was hard reading those because I was there, shortly before all of this really went down. And, so I was physically just in California, and I'm thinking to myself, I would love to be able to give people the answer, right? But it's not my job to give the answer. It's my job to help to create as much of the possibility for these solutions to come through, right? Um, but you want to be able to give people a device. You want that, and at the same time, you realize this is a give and a take. I think people need to be educated about their energy in their environment. I think that we also need to understand, and I know that the people that that know you, Josh, like they'll get this, but unfortunately there's a lot of people that don't. The resources that are extracted from Mother Earth, the environmental disruption that occurs in order for this, I'm holding my light here, in
Yeah.
order for the light to light up right now, like the death, the greed. I mean, when you look at all of the harm that has taken place in order for us to be able to have what we have right now, I think like that's a wake-up call of really acknowledging and seeing what has happened to the earth, right? It's like you got to see it, you got to acknowledge it, and then say, okay, really had enough of that, so what do we need to do to create something new? It's almost like switching from one form of energy to a whole other form of energy, but it has to do with our relationship to it, right? It has to do with what we're seeing and how we're engaging it. And how much do we really need is the question as well. So, California, it's a first world. California's having third world problems right now. That's kind of unacceptable, and it boggles the mind, because it shouldn't be that way, but maybe this is the state and the point that we have to get to for people to actually pay attention to what has been in order to know what is, and then where to go from there.
And I loved what you said about, people educating themselves and learning more about where their energy comes from.
Yeah.
I think I think so many people in this day and age are just like so busy with a 9-to-5 job or 2 or 3 jobs and working 12 hours a day, like that they don't, like they're on this hamster wheel trying to survive, and like they don't really necessarily have the time or the bandwidth to learn about certain things or even care about certain things, because they're just like, how am I going to put food on the table tonight for my kids? And I think a lot of the global population is in that space where to really think about and have the luxury that like some people do to think about these things of, what is the extraction process from the earth? Like, what are these huge machines clawing away mountainsides and blowing up, dynamiting mountains and extracting all of these resources from the earth to create, whether it's that the lamp or the light bulb or all the wires to carry the energy to our neighborhood.
Right.
And I think the more that we can inspire people to tune into the destruction and harm that is taking place to the planet.
Right.
And I think that the Pachamama Alliance and the Waken the Dreamer Symposium is a really beautiful tool to do that. If anybody listening to this has never experienced one of those, there's beautiful in-person symposiums that can be like from a whole day to a half a day with in-person facilitators. But then they also have this really great online version of it right now that takes 2 hours to complete. And I think that symposium and that experience really helps feel wow, what is the destruction that we're doing to this planet? And when you tune in, I don't think many people want to continue being part of that. I think a lot of people are in their hearts be like, wow, I want to help create solutions and live in a less harmful and impactful way.
Well, it's I mean, bottom line is, for most of society, it's on a treadmill right now, and it's going and going and going and going and going. But for those people who popped off the treadmill, or for those people who were never on the treadmill because they came in for that purpose to be the catalyst, right, for some of these things, you try to create information like those groups do, so you can be accurately, legitimately educated into what is happening, right? So those people don't have to work and find it all for themselves. In groups like us, we're trying to say, here's what's possible, trying to take this information, distill it again in layman's terms that, a mom or a college student can read, or even a high school student, to show that, no, this isn't hokey pokey stuff, this is real. And we think your consciousness and who you are and what you are is a part of this as well, to help to make these ideas and these technologies to be realized. So, I think this is what we're doing. And we, by the way, for New Energy Movement, we have a project right now that we're working on. It's not on our website yet because we're not done with it, but we're trying to actually show that. We're trying to show the what was, how it got to that point, why human beings agreed to certain things, like what is it about the human nature that allowed these things to happen? What is right now? What are we really looking at in our world? And where do we think that we're headed? That people can actually see to get a bit of a roadmap. So we'll have that up on our website as well. So it won't be for probably about like 2.5 months, but we also have community energy information that's on our website, and we do update it as often as we can, and we try to do it with what I call good information, because there are community energy programs that are they're all over the world. They're here in the United States, they're in Canada, they're in India, they're in the UK. Some do them, what I call better than others, but these are things that people could actively do in their area to look at different solutions for their energy. And by the way, if it hasn't been said, I'd say about half of the inventors I met, actually, no, that would be a lie. That would not a lie, but inaccurate. I'd say probably about 75 to 80% of the inventors I meet also they work on healing technology. So you see a lot of this go hand in hand with the new energy technologies, powering something. But you also see that they work on healing technologies as well. Like, who's a good example of that? Someone like Dan Winter. And I've used some of his devices. And another guy who passed away, his name is Guy Obolinski. I was in one of his devices several times, took my whole family there as well. Incredible experience. I wish he was still around. I wish the technology was still around. Really good stuff. But you'll see that this goes hand in hand. So it's not just our capacity to light our home. I think it's our capacity to light ourselves up, right? Like literally to understand the energy that's rolling and moving through, the earth and moving through us, to really create a relationship with it. Just a quote, Dolores Cannon. Have you ever heard of her?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I love that lady. I've met her a couple of times, and I used to do her method out of my home several years ago, just helping people. And she says, we come to Earth to learn how to influence and manage energy, right? So think about it, like energy in general, the energy of ourselves as, these free energy beings, but also what we create, how we power our world, what we create, right? Like it's we've created a separation with it, but the reality is the stuff ain't separated.
And I guess when you just said something, I'm trying to get out of like the glowing sun right here.
Oh, that's okay.
So when you said that a high percentage of the people working on these technologies are also involved in healing technology,
yeah,
and like realizing like just kind of had a light bulb in my my consciousness, my brain go off of like, rather than just like a light bulb to light the room or the home or the electricity, and all of the EMFs that are going on in the world, all the different waves that are, cruising around. Like, what if that simultaneously is a healing technology and a lighting technology, or beings of light?
Yeah.
That those two really seem to just weave together beautifully.
Yeah, well, I will tell you, I did experience something. I know I'm not supposed to talk about certain things I've seen, but I think if I don't give the names away or the details, I think I'm okay. But there was a light bulb that I saw that actually was, so it was being powered by nothing, the ether, and it was, or maybe it had a charge on it, and then it was, powered. I just saw it come out of a case, and then, the people around said that it was supposed to be, giving you positive juju at the same time. So there you go. So maybe that emergence into the one. Would be, and people talk about this, people who've seen extraordinary things, they'll talk about, being, whether it's an astral plane or elsewhere, but they'll talk about access to things like the living light. My friend Barry Littleton is his name. He's got a YouTube channel. He talks about the living light that, generates this light, but it's light in the sense of healing as well. So, you know, are you kidding? I would love to get to that. You know, the more simpler to me, the better, that I can do multiple things at once. I mean, my God, I mean, look what our sun does.
Yeah.
Look what our sun does.
I was just thinking of like,
Crazy.
okay, like the technology in my home is powered by love, and like I come in and like none of the lights are turning on. I'm like, wow, I gotta do some inner work right now. Turn it
You know, if you want my honest opinion, I think that's really where we're going, like ultimately. But I think we've got these bridges along the way where we're like using all of our, you know, materials here on planet Earth to like understand how X, Y, and Z all go together.
yeah.
But I think that's ultimately I really do think that's what we're moving to. It's
Yeah,
funny.
I do too. I choose to believe. I choose to believe that.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it'd be so much more. I think it would be, I was gonna say, I think it'd be easier, but you know, no, because we're still getting welled by whatever these frequencies are that are coming in. Because some days you're like, oh man, I thought I was clear on that.
I don't know if I'm gonna be able to turn the lights on today.
Looks like I'll just need to wrap myself in a blanket and stay warm that way. Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, isn't it? It's wild though. It's wild when you think about it. But I think we still get to have fun and play with like earth materials here and each other as well, right? You know, my little joke that I make, if we have a little bit of a setback in our work, you know, whatever be technology or whatever, something, I'll say, well, you know, as long as we're growing and evolving, if we're not growing and evolving, then we're not doing what we're really here to do, you know, because I think I think we use all these little, little things around us. We think they're big problems, and they are in some ways, but I think it's also part of our growth and evolution as a species here.
Yeah, maybe that's part of this game is like, I think linear time is an interesting concept, and then the perspective or thought that like everything is happening simultaneously, multiple
Mm,
timelines, and
yeah.
if we exist in other dimensions in our higher self, it's like maybe we totally operate in one dimension of ourselves at that place where we just like we're lighting up our home with our energy field, our heart, our love.
Yeah.
And now like this three-dimensional 3D game we're playing on Earth right now, like we're learning how to work with different natural elements and resources to like build the things. And it's like I guess there's beauty in that of like this. It's like it seems like a little bit of a challenging dimension at times,
Yeah.
but I think we're gifted this opportunity to work with these challenges right now.
Absolutely. I think that's what it is. And then to keep that flap open, you know, because that's what you know, going back and looking at that research, the calmness, you know, the capacity for the calm mind, that calm mind creates the openness, right? For access to these other places and spaces that we are a part of, but the openness and love is the connecting point to it, that we can see that, right? I mean, that's the connecting point. And you know, even when I think about the power companies, and you think about the pharmaceutical companies, you think about all of these companies and these companies, and again, it's not to say that they're all bad, right? Like, um, they're not, and they're doing what they're doing. But I think it's kind of funny that, wouldn't it be kind of funny if we realized at some point that we could have done this all along? It just took us this long to figure it out, right? It took us this long to say enough of that. I mean, it's like relationships. You say, but enough of that in this thing happening, that I want this instead,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so that's part of that growth and maturity that we're going through. But you know, the reality is it was there all along. And that's my sense about the way that the ether energy works and the way that these technology works. It's there all along.
Mhm.
We just have to, you know, mature to a point that we can collaborate to put the pieces together to figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you said, choose. I think like the community choice aggregation and community choice energy that's coming online
Mhm.
around different places. I know San Diego has, for the last couple of years, a community choice energy group that's been forming. And
Great.
whether it's where you're choosing where your electricity and energy comes from to power your home, or you're choosing who you're in relationship with, or whether that is toxic and you're realizing it's not good for either of you, it's like that choice and I feel sovereignty has been a big word the last couple of years, like what it means to be a sovereign being.
Yeah.
And choosing the intention we bring to a conversation, choosing the, just like realizing we have a lot of choice, and we can choose to support organizations like the New Energy Movement and NUI, and engage in new systems of organizational structure and management, new types of companies, and that we can choose not to support the systems that are not feeling good to us anymore. And I think the more people that are inspired and being like, wow, we really do have a choice, and then also people working to provide the other options and the models, like those are important to like have ready for people.
Right.
And
No, I think you got it. I mean, what I was seeing as you were saying that is, the more that we pull away from pieces of ourselves that we give to something, whether we're giving to pharmaceutical or energy company or our community that we don't feel a part of, but you're having to give something, let's say, meaning giving something about giving your energy to something that you don't feel values you, and you're giving pieces of yourself away, right? It's almost like if you can not do that and be in that sovereign space, and in that sovereign space you'll be able to see more, and you'll be able to have the capacity to create, right?
yeah
You have the capacity to create at that point, and you don't have to figure it out all for yourself. It's kind of like, what you've done with your work in the eco village. You didn't, no one person had to figure that whole thing out. People came together. You can speak about it better than I can. People came together.
That really is like the part I've been really inspired by, the sociocracy or holacracy of that the whole group is informing the process, and so everybody's wisdom is brought into the cauldron, to the pot, and and also there's nobody to point a finger at when like things aren't going right. You can't say, oh, the CEO or the president's not doing a good job. It's like, well, we're all totally part of this process, so like we as a collective community maybe are not like showing up in the highest way right now, and
right, we own it. We own it. We create it. We own it.
Yeah.
And that's connection.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I guess it's like I'm just seeing like whether at a atomic level how electrons or protons, I mean, how things interact, how seeing a human as just one individual cell, and how two humans interact, or a group of 12 humans, or I mean, I guess it's how the relationship of how things interact is a big part of it.
It is. And let me geek out a little bit for you, because I feel like, let's bring in some science, right?
Totally.
Because I think it's just interesting. And I don't know if I have a big aha, but I just think this is like crazy interesting. So in February, I think it was February. It's definitely February. I was in New Mexico for a conference, and I love this group. I love what they do. I love a couple of these different types of groups. Space weather. I'm like total space weather geek for so many reasons that we don't want to take space to explain. But there was a guy who spoke at this conference, the Observing the Frontier conference. This guy by the name of Ben Davidson puts it on. He does the Space Weather channel. And he's been doing them for a little while. It's the first year that I went. But there was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Michael Claridge that was there. And Michael gave his talk. And what I remember about Michael's talk was I could visualize everything he was saying. He was one of the only speakers that I could see what he was saying. Like, not intellectually, just I could visualize it, right? And I went, I gotta talk to that guy. So I made a beeline for him and, connected with him, found out he lives here in Boston. And I was like, we have to meet. I don't know what we're supposed to meet about, but would you be open? And he was so gracious. I was shocked how gracious he was. So I got a chance to host by the way, he is a, um, um, I don't think he's an astrophysicist, but he does, I believe, a lot of the astronomical observations that relate to the Sapphire Project. So he's a member of the Sapphire Project. The Sapphire Project, if you haven't heard, they replicate the atmosphere of the sun in a lab. They are the only group to do this. And they're also citizen scientists, I would call them. I'm not sure if they would call themselves that, but because basically they are independent and they share their information with the public what they can. And they also have, groups like the DoD and DARPA that are interested in what they do too. However, they're professional guys. They're very professional people, and they do want to share this information as they can with the public. It's good stuff, right? Like we need this. It's good, legit research and design. So I asked Dr. Claridge if he would come to the Global BEM conference. I hosted it last month in the Netherlands. And that's all about new energy technology. Excuse me, it's about the field in general of new energy technology. And he brought his colleague, Monty Childs, with him. So they gave a talk, and their talk was just incredible. They have gorgeous visuals that go along with what they do also. I would highly recommend, like, whoever's interested in this work, look at their stuff, because they really helped, in my opinion, like kind of pull together certain things in this conference just by the nature of what they did. So basically, they are trying to understand the energy of the sun, right? To tap into it, to harvest the energy of the sun. And they're not the electric universe people, but they understand that things work on, like the sun, the universe, everything works on these electrical currents, right? But one of the things that happened is very, very interesting, is in their experiments, what they were able to find, and I will look at my notes on here, is that the star gets all of the energy from itself, basically. So that violates the law of thermodynamics, right? So because the big thing in new energy technology is a lot of these things break the second law of thermodynamics. So, here you actually have a legit research that's showing that the star is getting all of its energy from itself. So therefore, that violates the law of thermodynamics. The star is transforming energy to the relationship to the space around it, its relationship to the galactic medium. So here we talk about the connection of people here on Earth and that the importance. Well, this is actually happening on the astronomical level, right? Like they're seeing this. So plasma is perfect at conducting electricity, and also, our inventors work on plasma type of technology. That's one of the ways to tap into the ether to get this energy. Electrical fields and currents naturally organize themselves. They're self-organizing.
Mm.
So sentience, anyone? If they're self-organizing, what's going on? And the group they said, what we realized is we were very much, because they thought their stuff was wrong when they were getting this information coming back. They thought, oh my God. And by the way, I don't speak for Sapphire. I'm what I would call probably a very bad speaker for Sapphire. So I don't even know if they would approve of what I'm saying, but these are my notes on it. And people can get the talk through the Global BEM site if they want to see it themselves, but hopefully I'm doing an okay job with it. But they were just very humbled by what they were seeing, because it wasn't what they had anticipated. It wasn't what they were expecting. And what they were seeing was there was electronuclear resonance that was occurring. And so there's even this resonance that's this electronuclear resonance that's occurring in space, right? But here's the cool part, is that when they measured things afterwards, there was transmutation that was occurring. So basically there was new elements that were found that were not a part of the original material, that were almost tectonic in their formation. And so basically every element has a unique light signature to it. And again, this is self-organizing. So you've got these geometric shapes that are occurring after, right? After you get this resonance with one another. So it's just fascinating. It's fascinating. And so the funniest part is Dan Winter, who's on the panel. He's Dan's not afraid to go as far out there as you can get, right? Which is great. He says, well, you know why that's occurring. It's your consciousness that's making that happen. So it was just wonderful because, for the first time, at least for me, my eyeballs saw what I call good experimental, legit research and design that's happening, that is being shared with the public. And then you've got all these different inventors that know these things work. They've got these concepts, they've got these ideas, they've had proof of concept, right? But what is actually really legitimately going on this greater level, this bigger level, that's making all of this real true, right? Or seem true. And to me, there was a really awesome part that these guys delivered on that I'm just ridiculously grateful for. So look at that. So things move, things shift, things change, things transmute. You can, have one element be part of your experiment, and the next thing you know, boom, you've got new elements. Crazy. Not crazy, cool.
Crazy.
Yeah. Crazy cool. But the self-organizing piece, that could indicate that there may be sentience there.
Yeah. And the word resonance keeps coming into my mind for numerous parts of this conversation. And I'm just thinking of some of those like images I've seen of like different sounds and vibrations creating patterns in sand,
Yeah.
and the different geometries that form, and, the flower of life and the fractals that we see, from the Fibonacci sequence and the divine ratio, from the smallest little atomic structure up to the spiraling arms of galaxies. I mean, it's pretty apparent that there's some pretty magical stuff going on here.
Yeah, exactly. So why would we treat the creation of a device that's supposed to tap into this sea of energy? I'll call it a sea of life.
Yeah.
Not be conscious about it and treat it, like it's a commodity. Like, what?
Yeah.
It's illogical. It's not even logical.
Yeah. So like the I'm just like envisioning the machine, the technology being like, no, you guys, I'm not gonna be created because you're
not doing this.
Want to make me a commodity and sell me. Like, I will not come into being.
Right.
And when your consciousness is like, we're gonna form this technology, and like, cool, then I'll come into being.
Right. I'm just not going to go. And on the flip side of that, because it does beg the conversation, and we did talk about this a teeny tiny bit, like people will say, well, the secret space program, they've got these technologies, they've got this, they've got that. I got to tell you, I don't know about that. It's not something that has ever come across my radar legitimately to pay attention to, or to research, or to anything like that. I know how I came into this planet with the consciousness that I have, and this is my road. This is my path. I do wonder when these claims are made about these different type of things already being developed. I just wonder. I wonder about that. I wonder what is actually happening. Is that same type of relationship to how those organizations have developed what they've developed to date? Do you know what I'm saying? So is that in the same consciousness? You know what, Josh, I don't think it's all about numbers and mathematical formulas and having a copy of a plan and following the plan and exit. I don't think it's about that. I just don't. I don't. And I'm sure You know, I'm okay to be proven wrong. It's not about being right,
Yeah.
but I think that there's a lot more that's going on in this world and in this arena than we have yet to even really, really, really understand and figure out. And I do think our relationship to ourselves and everything that's around us is far more important than maybe we understand at times. And maybe far more powerful too. So.
Yeah, the power, like that word power has come up a couple times in this conversation, and I was reading through kind of the introduction and some of the overview of hidden energy,
Mhm.
and it looks fascinating. I'm excited to read the whole thing,
Mhm.
and loved like the part about the yin energy dynamic
Yeah.
that I was being presented. And
Yeah.
um I also, I think we're in a time and space where there's lots of uh talk about balancing the masculine and the
Yeah.
feminine, on the
Yeah.
planet. And
Yeah.
personal practices of, whether it's yoga, meditation, tai chi, martial arts, like learning how to work with energy within our own bodies and beings,
Mhm.
and balancing. I personally really appreciate the perspective of that we all have the masculine and feminine within each of us to different degrees, and learning how to balance those of, like, and even forms of like tantric practices, the microcosmic orbit within an individual, like, being whole in our own energetic circuit.
Yeah.
And then we can learn how to explore that with other beings and other parties. But
Mm.
um just that I feel like we've had such a masculine kind of dominating energy for a long time that that is it's beautiful to see. I feel that kind of crumbling and more balance coming into play.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for acknowledging that. You know, I will say this, you know, we wrote it from the yin perspective, obviously, and we didn't want to, you know, say too much. We wanted it to be shared in the pages without being so explicit. But we did devote, you know, it's a small chapter to it. Um, but I can say from my experience, like the the capacity to genuinely include the yin in has been, you know, really a tough go. I think that, I mean, well, you just read Schauberger. Schauberger talks about that yin and yang balance. I was going to say Tesla, but I don't know if he specifically did or not. But I can definitely say Schauberger did. So you know, you have people that are saying this. You know, these people that have worked or had experience in this arena saying this, and also knowing that spirit is a large part of tapping into this. But you know, from a behavioral standpoint, there are not many women that are in this arena. And there should be. And again, that's the other reason why we wrote the book, was we wanted women to be able to read this as well. And it's it's important that more people get involved in it. And it's not like the energy of, oh well, let's have a couple of women, because I remember this was happening, and I want to share this. Well, let's just get a couple of women around the device because the women will know how to power it, right? Like, you know, it's like, really? You know, so then people put their hands on it, or they'll do these things, or they'll do these chants or whatever. I don't think that's what's being asked. I think it's like Mother Earth energy. It's you know, the yin is like this Mother Earth energy that says, you know, here's my fruit. Give back to me, respect me, honor me, help to heal children, help to heal the earth, help to create. You know, it's different. It's not. You know, it's not for the sake of having a female. It is what I would say, you know, more genuine yin that's needed in this arena, in a whole host of different ways. So yeah, it's been very much underrepresented. I mean, even in the new age community, anything around technology is pretty male dominated, yang dominated. And that's like I know I come across and a bit of more the soft skill, but it's because I don't want to lose my yin in order to do what I do, because I think it's one of the things I've been asked to show up for in this. And
and it's beautiful, and I feel that, and it's so beautiful to see you embodying that, and I feel like it's a really important part of this space.
I say more yin, both from men and both from women. And the guys, you know what? The guys love it when the guys get a chance to cry and they get a chance to, like share their heart or use their intuition on certain things and, be more collegial and more communal. They're dare I say, just nicer to be around.
Yeah. When something came up when we were talking about Mother Earth and the thought of like having women around some technology, and and I'm going back and forth between like talk of like the unified field and unity consciousness and kind of going beyond duality and more into unity, and then we also exist in this this game of duality at times when there's a North Pole and a South Pole of planet Earth and the positive and negative side of a battery and men and women, and I sometimes you and I've talked about this a little bit, really deeply honor and appreciate indigenous culture and tradition and wisdom, and I feel like often we hear like Mother Earth, Father Sky, and I totally honor that that story and discussion. And sometimes I also think about like the Earth has a North Pole and a South Pole, like it has its duality, it has its polarity. And like to me it feels more of like it is a unity consciousness than necessarily a mother, like per se. Just something to kind of explore in my mind. And I guess in terms of like how the technology is evolved and brought forth, this feels like there's something between the ones and zeros, a lot of code and technology, it's like, and the non-duality to the duality, and just kind of how that plays into this evolution conversation.
Well, okay. Another interesting thing that I'm not gonna say this right, but okay, I'll say what I'm gonna say in a minute. But there is different gravitational effects on the planet. So like where you are, like the gravity is different than in different spots of the planet. So just trying to share that not all is exactly one thing, right? You talked about the poles, but okay, so there's different different effects of how those magnetic poles affect like the positioning where everything is affecting, like even our gravity, right? Like the gravity that's there. So but I think about that a lot too. I'll be honest with you. I'm like, is Mother Earth really the mother? Is she really the female energy? I feel it. I couldn't tell you how I know it. Is the sun really the father? I don't know, because then that means the central sun is the ultimate father, then is the whole universe. I'm sorry, is that energy more male then? So I actually think about this very, very often. And, I would love one day to explore that further, because it's something that I do think about very often. I mean, it is clear that in these physical bodies, we do have males and females, yes, I mean, it's not either or. We know that in today's day and age, there's variations to both, right? But when you hear people talk about some super high level experiences that they have with these beings, these either angelic, cosmic, what have you, that they seem to be genderless, right? So I wonder. I'm sitting in the same spot that you sit, and even though I'm a female and I'm on planet Earth, and I feel that there is some resonance with that. Is the planet, all female, and is the sun all male? I don't know. I
Yeah.
wonder these things myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I believe in some indigenous cultures, like beings that are considered, I think they call it like two spirit,
Yeah,
spirited,
yeah,
like that they
yeah,
actually are really honored as like one of the more evolved like people in the village, in the tribe, because like almost like they're not in that duality, and I really
yeah,
like praised and cherished and honored, which
yeah.
which is beautiful, which I feel like our in this
Right.
modern era, like there's just a lot going on with
Mm,
transgender and things changing, and I feel
right.
like there's definitely a lot of beings that are willing to be more like, hey, like I am more of a unified being, than
Yes, yes.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I know sometimes people will say, well, that has something to do with the conditioning of, either pharmaceuticals or vaccines, or I don't know, because I know some of my experiences of spiritual experiences, and you know, they're genderless. It's not. It's more of this unified energy, and not an either or. Um, so it's interesting. It's just very interesting that you say that, because maybe though part of coming to earth is experiencing that duality, right? The feminine and then the masculine, like it's experiencing that duality to understand and know how to create that balance.
Hmm.
So and the relationship to the earth, and who knows, this is a wild thought, but I was thinking, because the KP, the KP planetary index was really low these last couple of days. And then this morning it popped up, and I was like, is that like the yin and the yang relationship? Like, is the yin like this, where you can feel the earth more because there's not a lot of charge to the earth, and then with that, that the either the solar wind or whatever constituted the pop up this morning to the KP, like, is that the yang that's like now coming? Like, I think about this stuff all the time, but I don't profess to have some grand knowledge on it. I do believe, though, that we are trying to come into some type of a greater balance, though, to understand how things are working um, more in this world. To understand how to learn and influence energy, and there's benefits to both, to understanding both the masculine and the feminine.
Hmm.
Obviously, massive benefits, because that's what creates life on earth here for humans.
Well, I've really enjoyed it. We've just let it be very organic, and that has been
Yeah.
our approach. And there's a couple, like, just I'd love to hear like any of the new energy technologies that you are most excited about, that like you can share, that just kind of like people can be like, wow, this is starting to come forth into the world.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So so I'm gonna look at a little bit at my notes here. So we've seen a couple of different things. There are some that I would say they're easier to work with than others because they're less complicated. And to me, like, those are probably the ones that are going to hit faster, that people could potentially see in their communities or see in their homes. Um, Electromagnetic motors. So like an electrical current passes through an inductor, such as a coil wire. A magnetic field is created. The field can induce additional source of voltage when sudden changes in flow of current are attempted. So we this is commonly known as back EMF, right? So that's one of the things that we see probably more common, that is, I don't want to say easier to create, because nothing is easy in this regard, but you see those more commonly. Um, I know there's a gentleman by the name of um, oh, sorry, I lost it for a second. I can see his face, but he works on water technology. He's featured in the book. I'll find him in a moment. He's in Florida. So that's treated with resonant frequencies. The atomic components of water can unbond themselves and free up the hydrogen to use for electricity. And so that is something that we see. My group does not work on that technology yet, but it is something that others have utilized. What you do see, which has a lot of debate around it, is LENR. Have you heard of that before?
I have not, no.
Okay, so that was pretty popular about 20 years ago, and there's been a lot of debate since. And again, I have to keep certain things a little quiet. That process has had some debate, not about whether it works, but about the field effects of that, if it's safe or harmful. And so with all of these technologies, just to share with you, it's really important that, okay, so they can generate power, but they have to be safe. Like the field effects around have to be safe. And so there has been some debate because some of the inventors that worked on things like LNR have gotten sick. Now, it could have been caused by that. It could have been caused by something else. So, and we've seen, I would say this, I have seen these type of the LNR type of technology. And so what that is, that takes intrinsic spinning atoms such as copper and iron, and when placed in a magnet field, they vibrate their resonant frequency, and they transmute and release energy in the process. And that that energy can be used for heating to conduct electricity, because basically it's heating things really fast. And so what that does is it creates efficiency, right? And sometimes with that type of technology, you have to work to manage that massive rush of heat to make sure it's mitigated and it can move through. So those are the ones that we've seen. Plasma technology is another one, but that's a little bit that's more complex. I don't know if that's something that we would see. To me, like the one that you would see probably most, that I would say, like if I had to bet money, not that I would want to, but if I had to, I'd say it would be the electromagnetic motors. I think that is the thing that you would probably end up seeing coming to a town near you. That would be my guess. So, what was that?
Yeah, what's the timeline of, so
Walt Jenkins, by the way, sorry, he's the water guy. Okay. I had to get it. I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. Walt Jenkins. Yeah.
The timeline for when some of these will start to be seen throughout the planet and our society, coming to a town near you.
Great. Yeah, great question.
I guess that's one part of this question, and then my second part of this question would be the current renewable energy technologies of different forms of solar, wind, geothermal. What are your thoughts on, engaging and participating, utilizing the renewables that are already present?
Yeah.
And while waiting for the other kind of technologies to come in.
Yeah.
Like, where do you kind of feel like we are in that spectrum and timeline?
Well, I would definitely say that, if you can be on something other than, the current grid that you're on, to utilize that, but more community energy, so like, for example, what happened with people in California, even if they had solar, they were still unable to get energy.
Yeah.
Right.
And so the correct battery system to store it. Yeah,
exactly. Unless they have a backup battery system to store it. And that is possible. And that does cost some money to do that, obviously. Yeah. And you need a lot of batteries. If you want to power a decent sized home, you need a lot of batteries to have that backup, be beyond, but it's still a solution. You're not going to be stuck. Right. Yeah. So listen, that's why we put that up on our website. We did something that we I don't think NEM has ever really done before, which is said, listen, there's a problem out there. We may be into new energy technology, but people are looking for solutions right now. So, find ways in your community to have your community be community energy. So heavens forbid if something does happen in this bigger grid, that maybe your community is going to be okay because it's self-sufficient, right? It's sovereign. So I'm a massive advocate for being able to use the technologies that exist now. Use those, absolutely, and try to find ways to get those sovereign, because I don't think that this whole thing is like we're just going to switch from one thing to the other. I think that there's going to be bridges in between. And I also think that things are going to be, things will probably have to get a little worse in order for people to make um, greater investments in working towards these revolutionary solutions. It's just the nature of it. It's not like, Josh, it's not like people walk in today and they're like, I see that the planet's in a really big need, and, what can I do to help? And here's, $10 million. That doesn't happen. People that have a lot of money expect a lot of money in return. They are still looking for the slam dunk ROI. And that, this field has been probably one of the most underfunded fields that exists out there, right? Like, here's some potential solutions that could actually legitimately help us, but you need teams of people working on it. You need conscious people working on it. You need that, right? And you need to be able to feed people and pay them so they can have a home and take care of the kids and, whatever else, and take care of themselves. Like, we're not out of the money system. So, we have to be realistic about that. But, I do think that things need to get probably, and not that I want this, but they do need to get things need to get a little tougher. Maybe, a couple more grids need to go down till people feel it, because, you've got these, some of these money people, they live in multiple homes all over the world. And, if one home gets affected, you can just go to another one. Where if one person's home gets affected, they can't. So they're not feeling that sting as hard as, the average person, right? So, that's my answer is, the win on this, I would say, man, as the consciousness moves, you're going to see these move. As people become more educated, you're going to see these move. And in the last 2 years, I've seen more resources be put in not just, in our group, but in general. There's more resources, there's more attention. I give praise to the public speakers that are in this arena, and those people that are constantly pushing forward to create education around this, because it's not an easy thing to do, but it shows people what's possible. And you create that space of what's possible, you're going to start to see a greater focus and a greater level of work on this. I mean, it all comes down to the capacity to help organize this in a way that people can work on these things more than what's being done right now. That's a long answer, but it's a truthful answer.
Yeah, it was great. And it made me, when, like, a couple times you referenced community, and I'm thinking of the community choice aggregation, like choice and community, and the community choice aggregation model of, like, really looking at these power structures of like a utility company that's kind of a monopoly, and these more, I would say, conscious organizational structures of like community choice aggregation that are trying to come in and say, we as a community want to come up with a ways to have our voice and our input, influence where we're getting our energy from.
Yeah.
And so I guess at what scale, so like if you're living in I grew up in a small town in Montana of like maybe 30,000 people, now in San Diego area of several million people, you're talking about very big differences in energetic needs and scale.
Yep.
And then even just what a community is considered, like if it's a neighborhood of, several hundred people. And I think there's just something about, and that's where I've focused a lot on with our work with the kind of the eco village and regenerative community development, and that Dunbar's number of 150 and a neighborhood like scale.
Yeah.
of, and rather battery backup system for every single house, but maybe it's for like the neighborhood has, if there's a neighborhood solar system and a neighborhood, battery system, or just looking at the scales of how energy is distributed throughout the community, whether it's 2 million people or 30,000 or 150.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I guess that's more in the current, thoughts of like the current technology that's out there. But then also, I mean, the scaling of any of these new energy technologies as well is like,
Oh yeah.
is it for a home? Is it for a neighborhood? Is it for a city? Is it for a country? Like the scaling is a whole nother part of the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay, the scaling. Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. I think one of the things that's really important to keep in mind is that so I have not gotten in my years of now doing this for this work a visit from the powers that be on this. I've experienced a phone call that I won't discuss, but the point is that it's there. The scale is something that the powers that be do pay attention to. So if your device can power something industrial, let's say, then that can be a problem.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about powering a home, maybe okay.
Yeah.
So there's still there's still guardrails that have yet to be clearly identified, because they haven't clearly presented themselves about what those guardrails are.
Yeah.
But the scale is definitely something to be considered, because creating a technology that has a large scale can be a problem, because it could potentially, this is not me, by the way, saying this is what I've heard, it could potentially disrupt the financial aspect of what goes on, with the economy, right? So if you have a massive game changer technology, there's going to be a lot of people who will not want that to happen.
Yeah.
All right. So, I feel like there's constantly this like information going back and forth with the ether and the earth, and all of us and them, who are the thems, are going, okay, well, what's really needed here, what's really needed, versus what would be nice to have. And I think what I feel in my beingness is, well, what's really needed, what's needed. So for us to work at what's needed, as opposed to what generates the greatest amount of power, and for us to work on that. To me, that's more of a yang thing, and not a balanced yin yang thing. The balance says, what do we really need, and to operate on the needs of this transition on the planet. The earth is changing, the sun's relationship, the magnetosphere is waning, like this stuff is happening, like the poles are moving, things are happening, right? That things are going on. And what do we really need? What is needed to help to move through this? I like, even people talk about the anti-gravity technology. Oh, we can have anti-gravity. I'm like, yeah, I would love to be able to have that. But at the same time, I think we still need to be able to solve some of these basic problems first, because that is what's needed. And, maybe that's a bit of the yin there going on. But hopefully that helps to answer your question, because, yeah, you'd want a device that powers a whole city. That would be lovely. But I don't think that would be something that the powers that be would allow. I could be wrong. I would love to be wrong, but it's not been in my focal point of bigger is better, more power is better.
Well, it's interesting that you say focal point, because like I'm thinking of integrated and distributed systems, and like maybe it's, I mean, even if it is a city of 1 million people, maybe it's not the most healthy and ideal to have like some central, like super powerful technology that distributes it like centrally throughout 2 million people. It's like, maybe it's more at a neighborhood scale. Like, this powers
I
100,
think,
like, homes for 150 people or something. And
yeah, I think that's what we're more or less looking at. That's my sense, to me, and that may be the safest. It's not so much about, oh, economically, but I think that may be the safest as well, because you know figuring out things like this and being able to get, this is a big switch. This is a big shift from what people are used to, and if something is scaled too large, then it can create a crazy amount of complexity that maybe none of us want.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like even back to that, like, if some of this technology is like simultaneously like healing technology and energy. Like, I was just thinking of,
Mm.
things like nuclear power plants like this super potent one spot that's creating
Yeah.
this, like, really hazardous stuff that we don't know how to deal with. And like
Yeah.
and like, versus like an energy, you know, um, machine technology in a home that is generating some electricity, creating a healthy and harmonious vibration for the people around. Like, those are just so different, like, approaches to this, like, super
Yeah.
potent, like, singular spot that's going to radiate, or just like a more distributed
Yeah.
consciousness throughout, like, how, it's,
Yeah. Yeah. And who knows? Yeah, I had this thought the other day that I was sharing with somebody. Who knows? Maybe having some of these devices around helps to like loosen up the density of things around, right? Like, who knows if maybe that's one of the field effects that occurs, is that it's actually helping to loosen things up, loosen that density, and give some positive juju back. I mean, I don't know if there's a device that measures that yet. Yeah, but it's definitely something that we should be thinking about.
mm-hmm.
So, but this stuff it requires time, it requires resources, it requires teams of people that know what they're doing, and it requires that focus. And again, the right intention, I think, is what yields the higher level juju to come through, with what we create and how we create it.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And I'm looking, like, I had some specific questions, like, that I wanted to ask you, but I'm looking at our time. Like, we've been having this conversation for a while, and it feels like, if you're open to it, like, maybe at some point down the road, we might have to have another
I was
discussion.
gonna say, I think we need like a part two, part two.
We might need like a part 2 and part 3.
Yeah,
Um,
that's good.
but yeah, because I do have some, like, I really enjoyed the, like, organic flow, and I liked kind of just getting into that space of being, and just seeing where it went. And then we got into some of the more specific science and technologies a little bit later in the discussion.
Hmm.
And I do have some thoughts and questions around, like, these different strategies for how we do create these organizational systems for organizations and companies, um, that I think you're demonstrating and modeling through your companies and organizations right now, that I think would be really worthwhile for us to talk about and help inform others to, like,
Love to.
create those.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, there's a couple other questions that I definitely have, but I think maybe we should bookmark those for
Okay.
chapter 2, for discussion number 2.
Perfect. That sounds good. And you know what? Yeah, we can have like a working call as well, to share with people. Because, it's a joke to think like, oh, I've got it all figured out. We've got this master plan and we're going to, bestow it upon people. No way, man. This thing is all about us rolling and moving together and being open and transparent as much as possible, with this, especially with those ideas and concepts that you brought up. Yeah, we can also have a working call. I'm happy to do.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
And I think that segues into, like, some calls to action we can end this with. And
Okay.
like, I wanted to give a plug for your book, Hidden Energy. I think that's a great way, because just looking through, like, I think people reading that seems like will give them a great framework and understanding for some of these discussions.
Yep.
And then you mentioned a few other things with the new energy movement, starting a local chapter. So is there anything you kind of want to just, like, end this with, of calls to action people could engage or support you or
Yeah.
in this process?
Yeah, well, I'd say with this process, just educate yourself as much as possible. Maybe realize that, that I've been in this for a while, that I always see there's a lot of hype around, what the government's going to do or what's going to happen, and this is going to happen, that's going to happen. I can't ever speak to that because it's not my world. I know that I work on this every day to try to bring this to, people, so my family can have it in their home. I can have it, our people that we care about all over the world, like to this is a call, right? But to educate yourself as much as possible, and hear stories of some of these people that have been inspired to create. And I think when people, either they read the book or they go on NEM's site or the NUI site, and that site, by the way, is the NUI, the NUIFoundation.com. They can go on there and see the two. And by the way, why two organizations? We NEM has been public education and advocacy, and the NUI organization is a CIC. It's a community interest company. We found that there's more that we could do there than we could do with the 501c3, and that's where we have a lot of our testing and vetting, and some of the R&D. We actually have a lab now that's in Europe. So all of that stuff, we couldn't do all of that. It was too complicated. So NUI was birthed as a way to support the evolution also of NEM. But calls to action: educate yourself as much as possible. If you feel a call, with this, send us an email. We've got forms on our both sites in terms of, maybe what you feel called to do, how you can potentially participate. We do have a person that works with us that is, thank God, answers emails. And so it takes a little bit of the pressure and stress off of us. But yeah, reach out and connect with us, and we can see what we can do. And last thing I would say is we are gifting away a couple of books. If you go on our website, there's a form on there. So, these are people, whether you're involved in a nonprofit, you're involved in a school, or you don't have the means to legitimately purchase a book. We gifted a couple of books through the organization that people can fill out a form and we'll send you a book.
Oh, beautiful. Well, I'll send attached to this this discussion when we send it out into the virtual world and social media. I'll attach links to Hidden Energy and the New Energy Movement and the NUI Foundation, so people can easily access that. And please share this information with any of your friends and family, colleagues that are interested in this stuff. It's been an honor, Susan, to spend this time and space with you. Thank you so much for doing this.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for making the time literally whiz by, Joshua. Thank you so much. You're my inspiration.
Well,
I mean that.
mutual. So thank you all for joining us for this episode of the Local Earth Discussion Series, and we'll be back soon with discussion number 2, maybe 3 with Susan.
All right.
All right. Aloha. Thank you.
Aloha.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Local Earth Discussion Series. If you enjoyed the information in this discussion, please share it with your friends, family, and colleagues all around the world. As mentioned earlier, we are a nonprofit organization that operates primarily from your donations. So please consider becoming a Local Earth Patreon member. Membership begins as low as $1 per month. And this is also brought to you in partnership with the Solar Energy Alliance. There is information in the description below how you can get a free solar proposal for your home. And there's also information on how you become a partner or an ambassador with the Alliance. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Local Earth Discussion Series. Aloha.